good evening to every one of us that have taken precious time to join this session. My name is Norode Echo, and I will be taking you on Azure Application Proxy. We are going to be looking at the benefits and how we can set it up so that we can always have the leverage of using these feature of Azure in our own environment. So I'm going to share my screen shortly. I'm going to start the session. Also, my name is Norode Echo, as mentioned earlier. I'm a cloud productivity and infrastructure engineer with Ha-Shem, and I will be handling this session within the next within the next 30 to 45 minutes. So to go straight into the session, we'll be looking at what Azure Application Proxy is and the benefits, how to set it up, the end user experience, single sign-on, and lastly, we look at the demo and questions. So what is Application Proxy? I'll start by introducing the reason for introducing this product to us. We know as employee, most of our employees work on personal devices and adopt readily available software application, and they maintain control over application across corporate data centers and public cloud platform is becoming more complex and challenging. So employees are more productive when they have a single username and password to remember and a consistent experience for every device. They also save time when they can perform self-service tasks like resetting forgotten password or requesting access to an application without waiting for assistance from the help desk. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has changed how organizations run their businesses, it also changed the way we work, the way we learn, and the way we collaborate. What haven't changed is the critical role identity plays in helping organizations to be secure and productive. So because identity still remains the part of our own job role that gives us access to organizational resources. That part have not changed. Organizations around the world have accelerated the adoption of security and collaboration apps. But behind these numbers are stories of customers like us working tirelessly to help our organization to stay ahead.
Sorry to cut in, sir. Can you hear me?
Sorry?
Are you moving your slide, or you are still on the basic agenda slide?
Yes, I'm just introducing it.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to be sure.
All right. So the growth of app usage with Azure AD shows that organizations are connecting more apps to single sign-on. While it provides seamless and secure access to more apps, the best experience will come from connecting all apps to Azure AD, so people can complete all work-related tasks from home and stay safer during the pandemic. And we know also that we have applications that are on our on-premise. Meanwhile, if our users are to work from their homes, they will not be able to access those applications except those applications are published in the cloud, or they are published externally for access, or your users will have to go start using VPN to access those applications, which will increase the overhead cost of organization expenses. So what is App Proxy? Application Proxy actually is sorry, let me go to that slide 1 second. So application proxy is actually a feature of Azure AD that actually enables us to access our on-premise applications while we are working remotely or anywhere on our devices, or we are even in our homes, we can work directly from there. Remember earlier I explained that due to the COVID-19, more organizations are working remotely, and apart from working remotely, they are also adopting the use of mobile devices to complete tasks. Apart from even working remotely, sometimes there are times that you may need to complete a task, but the time for you to stay in the office space have been exhausted, and you need to beat that traffic. You need to get to the house on time and all that. So with application proxy, you can easily access these on-premise applications, and you can complete such tasks without being worried about time. So you will need to get to your house. There are some benefits that are attached to application proxy, which are it is simple to use, and it is also secure and cost effective. What do we mean by that? Being simple to use, users can access their Azure on-premise application the same way they access Microsoft 365 and other SaaS applications, that's software as a service applications integrated with Azure. You don't need to change or update your application to work with application proxy. So that's how simple it is to use. It is secured in the sense that on-premise application can use Azure authorization control and security analytics. For example, on-premise application can use conditional access and two-step verification, also known as MFA. Application proxy does not require you to open in-bank connection through firewall. So your security team will not need to be worried about exposing the organization to attack from outsider. It is also cost effective because you don't have to set up a demilitarized zone to protect these servers, or you don't have to start setting up any other form of complex infrastructure in order to set up Azure application proxy. It is as easy as that. Other benefits you can get from application proxy is that it supports single sign-on across devices, resources, and apps in the cloud and on-premises, meaning that you can always have access to your app when you sign into the portal, the Office 365 portal, and you authenticate in the portal, you have direct authentication to your on-premise app without having to sign in again for the second time. And it quickly uses cloud features with the security of Microsoft Cloud. So you don't have to be worried about being infiltrated by attackers, because you are protected by the security provided by Azure. You have your MFA as a second level of authentication to access those on-premise apps, and you can actually monitor these apps, and you can get real-time analysis of how the apps is being used or accessed. You can also monitor centralize the management of users' accounts using the Azure application proxy, and it also provides centralized control of identity and security. The last is that you can automatically add or remove user access to application based on the group membership. So you can easily create something like a dynamic group, and you create a criteria for users to be added to that dynamic group. And immediately those users are added to that dynamic group, they will have access to the particular app that you need them to have access to. Another thing it features is that it works with web applications that use integrated Windows authentication, and also apps that have form-based authentication, and also for web APIs that you want to expose to rich application in different devices. So these are the features that it presents, and you have a lot of benefits using it. So the diagram we have by the left presents how it works. You can, when a user signs in, there's an authentication that is done on Azure AD, and from Azure AD, the user have access to the application. It may be a third-party application or an Office 365 application, and it can also be your on-premise application that are on your on-premise environment. But our focus in this session will be for applications that are on-premise. This is also the workflow for users signing into an on-premise application or app that is hosted in Azure Web Application Proxy. So if these users sign in to his or her app, there is an authentication that goes through to Azure, and the application process service directs that authentication to the application that are on-premise. There are just three ways that the Azure Application Proxy work. The first is that connectors are deployed on premises, and then the user accesses the published URL, and the headers are translated if needed. What does this mean? You have to install a proxy connector on an on-premise server that have access to that application on your on-premise environment. So if you are installing the connector, you need to be able to access the on-premise application. So definitely that server that is going to host the connector should be in your on-premise environment, not outside your on-premise environment. And when users need to access it, they can access it using the external URL, or they can access it directly from Office 365 portal by clicking My Apps. So there are two authentication modes for this App Proxy: the front-end mode and the back-end mode. The front-end mode uses the pass-through authentication, and the back-end mode, the pass-through authentication is a form of authentication that is being done from our on-premise. So meaning that whenever a user tries to sign into an on-premise application, the authentication goes through on-premise, and the user will be able to access the application. The second form of authentication is authenticating through Azure, meaning that if the user signs in, the authentication is done from Azure AD, and the user then have access to the application that is hosted on premise. Now, the next we are going to look at is the setup. But before we look into detail the setup, we are going to look at the prerequisites for setting up Azure Application Proxy. Number one, you must have a Microsoft Azure AD Premium subscription. It could be the Azure AD Premium 1 or Premium 2. And secondly, you need to be an administrator in your Office 365 tenant to be able to set up the Azure App Proxy. The next is that the user identities that are being used to access this application must be synchronized, meaning that if your users are on-premise and they are not synchronized, there's no way they can use App Proxy. So they will need to be synchronized from on-premise to Office 365 before you can be able to add them to App Proxy. Next is that the minimum OS, the minimum Windows server we need to install the proxy connector on is server 2012 release 2 or later. If you are using a server that is below 2012 release 2, you may run into issues trying to set it up. The next we are going to be looking at is how to prepare your on-premise environment for App Proxy setup. You will need to ensure that ports 80 and 443 are open to outbound traffic. If they are not open to outbound traffic, you may also run into an issue trying to set it up. There are also some Azure IP ranges that you need to also allow in your firewall in order for the connection to be successful. Then the next, after you have satisfied all these prerequisites, you need to install and register a connector from a server that is within your environment. You verify the connector has been installed and registered correctly from Azure portal, and you can also verify it from the server itself by looking at the services in the server. Under services, you are supposed to see the Microsoft AD application proxy connector and the application proxy updater. Ensure that those services are running for application proxy to work perfectly. To set it up from the Azure portal, it's just some simple steps that you need to go through. From portal.azure.com, you click on Azure Active Directory, and from Azure Active Directory, you are going to see the App Proxy. You click on App Proxy, you see connector. You see the option to download connector. Download the connector service. On this page should be accessed from the server from which you need to install the App Proxy connector. So you can download it directly into the server and install it. For this, after you downloaded it and the download is successful, you're going to see the connector here, and it's going to be marked green as active. You can also create what is called a connector group. The connector group works as a form of redundancy when you download the connector on multiple servers and put them in a group. If a particular server is down, the connector service will work from the other server in order for you to access the on-premise applications. After you have done the connector download and setup, you click on Configure App from here, or you can go to Enterprise Application and create new app from there. So from Enterprise Application, when you click on Enterprise Application, you see an option for your on-premise application, which you select, and you have the URL which you use to access the on-premise application. You paste it on the page that will be provided for you. After pasting it, you then be able to then you click on OK and apply, and you then have access to the application. But before a user can be able to use this application, the user will need to be added to either a group or be added as a user in the application proxy settings. So you can then go back to the application you've created. When you select the application. If, for instance, you created an Exchange server, you can go back to the application from Enterprise Application page. You can click on Enterprise Application here. You select the application from there. Then you can add users and group. You can create a group that you are going to add different users to. After you have added those users, you can then select add users and group and add the group or you can add individual user. For this example, individual users are added to this. So when you have done this, you can then assign. Immediately you assign, when the users click on the portal.office.com page, he will be able to see the application there and select the application and use it. So like I also said, you can sign into portal.office.com or myapps.microsoft.com. When you click on all apps, you are going to see the on-premise application and you'll be able to select the application and use. So this is just a diagram of what a user will see when these applications have been published to the user. You'll be able to see all of them and can click on any of them and have access to it. These are for third-party application integration to Azure Applications Proxy. There are some third-party applications that you can actually deploy to your App Proxy. So these are some of them. You have Salesforce, Gbox, Cisco, Slack, and others. But our focus today is not on third-party applications, but on-premise applications. Now, the next we are going to be looking at is the single sign-on. When you have set up application proxy successfully, you will be able to sign in to the portal.office.com or myapps.microsoft.com, and you'll be able to see that application. But when you click on the application, you may need to sign into the application again in order to have access to the application. But because most users may find this difficult or a task for them to achieve, that's the reason for single sign-on. So you can configure single sign-on for each of the applications that you have created or you have deployed on App Proxy, such that when a user signs into the Office 365 portal and click on the application, you have immediate access to the application. But for single sign-on, you need to know the form of authentication that the app that you are deploying uses, because there are different forms of authentication method that is required for single sign-on. So if you know the type of authentication, whether it is form-based or SAML authentication, you then be able to configure single sign-on to those applications. For you to configure single sign-on, when you go to these properties of the app that you have published on Azure Application Proxy, you select the pre-authentication, change it to pass-through. After changing it to pass-through, then you can configure your single sign-on. After configuring single sign-on, you can turn it back to Azure Active Directory pre-authentication. Like I said earlier, there are different forms of authentication for different applications that will be in your on-premise. It could be your password-based sign-on, which is a form-based type of sign-on, integrated window authentication, header-based sign-on, or SAML single sign-on. Every of these form of authentication have their different configuration on single sign-on whenever you are trying to set single sign-on on application proxy. The next we are going to be running through is a short demo of all that I've said, how to set up Azure Application Proxy, and how to configure single sign-on, add members to the app so that they'll be able to access the application proxy, and some other things we are going to look at. Kindly give me a few seconds to set up the lab for that.
All right. Thank you. We'll be waiting. I can see your screen now.
Okay. All right, so from Azure Active Directory, from portal.azure.com, you click on Azure Active Directory and you see application proxy. This is just a start up or a setup of application proxy afresh. For this tenant, it has already been set up. You can see that there are two connectors here. One is active and the other is inactive. But for you to start up afresh, for most of us, we are going to see a note here that Azure application proxy is disabled currently in our environment. But for you to be able to enable it, you need to download the connector service first. When you click on download connector service, you see acceptance and download. You click on it and you have the application proxy downloaded, the connector service downloaded to the server you want to run the connector service on. Like I said, it has to be a server that is in your environment, and you will need to, that server will be able to reach your applications that you want to publish in application proxy. The next after that, you need to configure an app. I also talked about creating a connector group, meaning that you need to have more than one connector, either 2 or 3, on different servers. So for the sake of redundancy, so that if a particular connector is not available, you'll be able to reach your application when the other connector is available. So most times that there's inavailability, it could be an error with the connector service, or the server is not responsive. That's when you have that issue. So that's the essence of connector group. Next, you are going to configure the app. But before you configure the app, let me try to explain disabling application proxy. If you don't feel like using the application proxy again on your environment, you have to uninstall the connector from the server that is installed. Then come here, disable application proxy. Then you can delete the application from configure app session. I also told you that you can also reach this app configuration from enterprise application also. So it's either ways. So from here, you can click on new application. Like you can see here that you have other cloud platform like third-party applications that you can also publish in your app proxy, like Amazon, Google Drive, Google Cloud, and Oracle, and many others. But you go and click on add an on-premise app. When you click on that, you'll be given the next page where you need to name the app. For instance, is your Exchange server you want to publish to Azure. Let me say Exchange on-prem. So you input the URL that you use to actually access the Exchange server. For instance, I have https colon so here, after typing the address of your Exchange server, the external URL, the internal URL you type, the external URL will be populated automatically, and your method of authentication will be Azure Active Directory. If you choose pass-through, authentication will be done from your on-premise whenever you try to sign into the application from portal.office.com. Then when you choose Azure Active Directory, the authentication will be done from Azure AD. You can leave all these other settings as default, then you click on Add App. When you click on Add App, I've already added an app, so I'll take us to here it is. When you click on Add App, you are going to see the app. Okay, let me just add my app. I think I removed it. Okay, so I'll add the app here. So this is the internal URL of my app that I use for accessing my Exchange server on-premise that I'm adding right now. So we're still adding the app, just some few seconds. Okay, I think it's already been used. Let's refresh and see if we have the app there. Okay, so I have the app here. So after creating the app, you can come to your enterprise apps again and you see the application here. So I have it here. So these are some of the details of this application. You have the overview, and here we are going to look at the properties of this particular app. Here we can see the homepage URL. If you need to copy this URL and use it to access the app, you can use it. Then you can enable for users to sign in, or you can disable it. So even if it has been assigned to a user, you can turn it off for users not to be able to sign in. Here you can also add the users and group, like I showed earlier. Here you can add users, or you can add a group. So you select, and then you have the option to select the users or group by searching out for those users or group. Here you can enable single sign-on for the app. Like I said also, there are different forms of authentication that different apps use in our on-premise. So there's a SAML, there's the password-based, and then there are also linked apps that we can also set. You can see that this disabled for single sign-on is active here. So in order to set up single sign-on, I'm going to select any of these form of authentication to set up single sign-on. Then if you want to make a modification to the application, that you've already published, you can come to Application Proxy and you can see the setup that you've already done earlier. You can also use this to actually test the application if it is working fine. And when you click on Open Application, you'll be able to access the application, or if there's an error, you will be able to see the error that you have, and you can click on Open Report to diagnose those errors. You can set conditional access for the application. Like I also said earlier, you have the leverage of Azure Security on this on-premise application, meaning that you'll be able to leverage everything that Azure gives you as a form of security to protect this application from unauthorized access. So you can set conditional access. You can check sign-in log. So just like you can check sign-ins in Azure, you can check the sign-in to this application, and you can see some success and failures on this application. You can check the usage and insights, and you can also check the audit log. Audit log is to show you changes that have been made by an admin on this particular application, and you'll be able to track those changes and use it. Access review is for access that have been done to the application, that have been made to the application, and what have been done when that access was given. So this is the overview, and it carries most of the information that you need to get from the site pane. And I guess that's all about Azure App Proxy. So if we have any question and we need clarification, I'll be available to attend to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much, sir. Wow, what a wonderful session, very interesting session, very informative and really helpful. So a single secure sign-on, really, I'd love to say it's a big relief to IT guys who wouldn't have to deal with, hello, I've forgotten my password call every time. Thank you so much, very interesting, sir. As a matter of fact, I believe that a lot of people also enjoyed the session, because while we were just about 31 minutes into the webinar, we already have questions flowing in. But before we jump into answering those questions, I just want to say that Microsoft Azure is a cloud computing platform, that you can use to migrate and optimize your app. You can use it to work. It helps you also work remotely and securely, and it is also a cost-effective innovation. It has about 200 services that that can help to upscale your business, that can help to transform your business positively. One thing that we have discussed today is just one of the functionalities of Azure AD, and then I believe that if you request a session with us, a discovery session with us, we'll be able to identify some pain points in your organization and how Microsoft Azure can help to solve these things. So please, I would want you, after this session, please, I will look forward to seeing your emails on sales@Ha-Shem.com as a request for a discovery session on Microsoft Azure, or if you want to know more about this Azure application proxy. Thank you so very much. So right now we would go into answering those questions. So Mr. Onoriode, so while the session is ongoing, we have 2 questions that came in from Feyi Jimmy. The first question is that, is port 80 critical given the cyber security mandate in some environments against the port? That's the first question. Did you hear that, sir?
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Mr. Feyi Jimmy. So yes, you will need to open either port 80 or port 443. So if you have concerns with port 80, you can actually open port 443, but it's not really that necessary for you to open the two, that you can open one of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So the second question that came in from Mr. From Fejimi is that we will there be a drop in application speed from Azure from the Azure proxy? If yes, how can it be optimized?
Yeah, no, there won't be a drop because it is actually depends on your own environment. If the bandwidth you have in your environment is very stable and fast, you get what you are asking for. Because what happens is that the connection to the application is done via a proxy, and that proxy is being connected to use it through Azure. So if the environment you are connecting to is fast, you are going to get a very fast service. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering that. All right, the next question we have is from from Adams, and the question is that is it good practice for the connector to be installed on a domain controller?
Well, it's not advisable to install the connector in a domain controller, but some people do that. But you might run into issues installing it in a domain controller, especially if it is your primary domain controller. So it's always advised for you to have maybe a dedicated server. Just for me to add also, it is also not advisable for you to install it on a domain controller, because some users or some IT some organization do install the password protection connector in their domain controller. There's also a proxy connector you need to install on your domain controller for password protection. So Azure Application Proxy Connector does not work together with that connector, because both of them use the same form of update. So you're going to run into an issue installing it on a domain controller. So on average, what I will advise is that you don't install it on a domain controller, because you may also have some other connectors that are running the same type of service there.
All right, thank you so much, sir. So there's another question from Mr. Solomon is that okay, he said it's a very good presentation. I think that's a compliment to you, sir, saying a very good presentation. So he's asking if this session will be uploaded on YouTube channel, and my answer is that yes, 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 it will be uploaded, and then you can watch this session later. Thank you so much, Michael, for also responding to that question. I can see your response coming in now. All right. So if you have any other question, please, we can use the raise hand feature, and then I will call you to ask your question. All right. While we are still waiting for questions to come in, I can see Michael reminding us in the chat box. It's telling us to please follow us on all social media platforms. Yeah, send the link right to the chat box. Please, you can follow those links to follow us on all social media platforms, because that is the only way you can get access to all the updates that we are putting out there. So you can always take advantage of this update. It's so good to be an insider. If you are following us back to back, you would be able to take benefit of the many good, valuable information that we are putting out. And it is very important for you to please also fill the evaluation form. We want to hear from you. That is the only way we can get better for you. So please kindly fill that evaluation form. Let us know how well we did, and let us know how we can be better for you. So we are still waiting to see if there are any other questions. But while still waiting, I just want to remind you that Ha-Shem Limited, number one IT solution provider in Nigeria, and also, of course, in extension West Africa. We pride ourselves as a company that has very capable team of experts. You know, as Mr. Honoriade is even churning out the answers to the question, you can sense that that is what we do. So there are so many solutions, there are so many technologies that are helping to improve and transform businesses. It is helping to organizations to leverage many opportunities. But how do you maximize these technologies? How do you use them? How do you know the one that is suitable for you? Well, save yourself the headache. Don't answer the questions, because that is what we do, and we'll do that for you perfectly. We will identify your pain points and give you the solution that helps you manage and also eliminate those pain points. So please, you want to send your mail, you want to request for a discovery session, you want to request for a quote on sales@Ha-Shem.com, sales@Ha-Shem.com. So it appears as though there is no question for us. And thank you so much once again, Mr. Honorio De Eco. It is a very wonderful session, very insightful. Also, big shout out to Mr. Michael Adilaja, who engaged us in the chat box. And then a very big thank you to everyone on this call who has spent valuable hour of their time to be on this call, to gain more knowledge, and to improve the broad knowledge that we have on Azure AD. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. It is really appreciated. So until 2 weeks again, in 2 weeks we'll be having the Tech Security Tuesday, and that is on Tuesday. That is and then also on Thursday we are going to be having the Tech Talk webinar, just like this session, just in 2 weeks from now. Definitely, if you follow us on our social media platform, you will get the update when it comes. Thank you so very much. Please enjoy the rest of the day. It's a goodbye from here.